Well, we just wrapped up a crazy week of Canadian soccer action between World Cup qualifying and Olympic qualifying, and that leaves us with a lot to think about and talk about on this week's edition of Waking the Red Weekly, presented by Footy Talks. My name is Mitchell Tierney, and today on the show, we'll discuss everything from how Canada played to the channel they played on and everything in between. Our guest this week, joining us about 15 minutes or less, is Gavin from Newspapers on Seats podcast, as well as one of the most well-traveled journalists within Canadian and CONCACAF circles. He'll take us inside Canada camps and plenty of other stuff from around the region and all its craziness that it is and that we know. And I don't know if we love it. We'll get to that anyway. CONCACAF chaos. But first thing, joined, of course, by Michael Singh. But maybe the real headline this week, Mr. Jeffrey P. Nesker, his beautiful new Toronto FC kit. Jeff, now that you have the kit on, how does it feel? Mm-hmm. What's the full review? You can give us. You're one of the first people who can give us the full review.
Oh man, again. We got a kit episode coming up, but I will say this: in terms of fit and finish for the authentic, treat it and buy it like you would the championship hoop kit. It's almost the exact same fit. So feel happy sizing up one and confident in your purchase. If I can impart any advice to the TFC faithful, it is that: be happy with a size up, and you'll be fine.
Ah, there you go. That's some useful advice. Jeffrey and me, you were chatting a little bit before the show, and you were saying that the sizes of the kits, they change year to year. The fit of the kit changes.
It can be frustrating, yeah, depending on the material, especially in authentic. It can be a bit of a horror show. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles. The templates are always so different. I mean, generally the athletic cut is tapered, but sometimes the material is thicker than other times, and sometimes the cut of the shoulders and that sort of thing. So yeah. You're
receiving some
thanks, Ryan.
Comments. There you go.
Thanks, buddy.
Ryan telling Jeff that he's looking sharp, and he doesn't get that too often. So whenever he can, he'll take it.
Early and often, just like the Canadian men's national team last night against the Cayman Islands. Big win in World Cup qualifying, record-setting win, 11-0. They also won 5-1 against Bermuda earlier on. Two pretty comprehensive wins. I think there was maybe one moment in the entirety of those 90 minutes that I was nervous, and that's when Borjan dropped a ball essentially into his own net, which wasn't great. But, I mean, look, I don't know how much you can take out of this other than good to get some new guys integrated, a bunch of first-time scorers, including Toronto FC's Richie Larea, and I guess essentially job done from the two games here.
Yeah.
More than that.
Well, fair enough.
At what point last night did you guys tune out and realize that this game was finished, over? Because for me, it was about midway through that second half where I was like, okay, this is getting really painful now. Usually this is Canada on the other side of these things, so it was sort of nice being on the the giving end of things, but that was almost a little bit tough to watch towards the end, wasn't it? Or is that just me?
No, not at all. Nothing about that game was painful, Mike. I mean, you got to take your joy when you can get it, my friend, and that was about as joyous an occasion. Damn.
They were like playing a house league side, man. Every time they went up the pitch, it would be a great scoring chance. And hey, like I said before, usually it's Canada on the other end of things, so it's a little bit nicer to be on that side. And I think it's also a testament to how good we've been saying this Canada team can be. And I think this is going to become more common, where when we do face these weaker sides, it will no longer be a CONCACAF match where, sometimes it's a little bit tighter than it should be. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more blowouts because Canada has the offensive firepower. And, it doesn't matter who was starting, who was on the pitch. They made 9 subs for this match. The depth of the squad is surreal. And, hey, that's a positive result for Canada.
I'm with Jeff on this, though. Yeah, I enjoyed. Jeff and I were on a Zoom call during this, but I enjoyed anytime I can watch a Canadian men's national team match where it's 90 minutes and I have zero stress. I mean, that's a dream right there. And there was absolutely no stress yesterday. So I enjoyed that from minute 1 to minute 90.
Yeah, I'm remiss to get into too much this because I have it on rather good authority that Mr. Gavin Day is going to come in and throw a wet blanket over all of our enthusiasm for beating minnows. So, maybe get it out right now. That was fabulous. It was absolutely fabulous. We felt like world beaters. Watching superstar soccer aficionado Alphonso Davies just absolutely clown an entire team was very, very satisfying. I think everybody got to display in the same way that I thought the Olympic team was a lesser entity due to the fact that everybody was trying to play hero and dribble through the entire Mexico side. We saw the opposite for this one. Everybody was playing hero and were showing off their best tricks. It was kind of like playing FIFA Street a little bit and just dominating. It was real nice.
Since you brought up that Olympic team, Jeff, I have there's someone who tweeted at the Wake in the Red account. I'm sorry, I don't know the username right now, but he posted a question. Yes, since Canada sort of knew that they were going to go into these games and dominate these teams, why didn't they split up the squad so that some of their players, that stronger players, would be on the U23 team and some of their players would be on the World Cup team? Do you guys have an answer to any of that?
I would suggest that it's pandemic shenanigans, just who was available, whose club team said yes, filling out the roster, maybe some internal drama between Biello and Herdman about who each of them get. Biello's not an assistant coach of no reputation. He has been a head coach before, so I would assume that egos come into play, and he's like, John, you can't leave me with a bunch of jobbers. I've got, even though the odds are stacked against us, I've got a reputation I need to uphold. So I feel like it was a dialogue between all respects. Absolutely.
Yeah, look, they obviously super prioritize World Cup qualifying, and I think they're right for that. I mean, who knows if it comes down to goal difference? Shuttersworth, my good buddy Tagla, bringing that up in the comments. And Canada certainly has that in spades from the first couple of games. That's for sure. But I mean, yeah, there's so many things to factor in here. One,
Gavin's here, and because I'm playing producer today, maybe we should just bring him on early so that I'm not.
Sorry,
my
Jeff,
finger.
hold on.
Oh, sorry.
It's all good. Well, the club situation, right? Like we have, it's not FIFA mandated tournaments, so. Even guys like Corbiano, who knows what Herdman was telling him behind the scenes to get him to commit to Canada. Maybe he was contingent on him playing with the first team, and he obviously showed he's up to snuff, at least against these calibers of teams. But I mean, I don't think any of us think it will be long before he's, fully capable of playing first team men's soccer, considering what he showed
easily in
these matches. So
easily,
yeah. So I just think it came down to timing. I mean, guys like Cornelius, I think if you don't have the Olympic qualifying, he's with the men's team. So there was maybe a couple of concessions made, but I think overall, between the Toronto FC COVID situation and the World Cup qualifying, I think it was that's why maybe the men's national team just won every tie essentially, and that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, also Cornelius got to wear the armband, so that must have been pretty attractive to him.
That's what I was wondering too, right? Is could you have a few more of those players step up and play bigger roles for that U23 team? But as Mitch pointed out, like in this tag points out, goal differential is huge for this team, and World Cup obviously is more important than Olympic qualifying. And just to have that camaraderie of these guys spend the whole camp together, because it's not very often they get to come together. So the fact that they can spend the whole camp together, train, work on their chemistry, whatnot, even off-field chemistry, I think that could go a long way towards, further pushing their qualifying.
Yeah.
Campaign.
And my dopamine hit wasn't lessened by the oversellies like it was when the U.S. Women's team took it to, who was it? South Korea? I can't remember.
Thailand, I want to say.
Thailand, yeah. And, and that, like, as much as goal differential also mattered there, it got disgusting after a while. I didn't have that issue. It could be that I like this team and I don't care enough about the women's American team, but. There we go. Anyway, we got Gavin here, and I gotta flex my.
Can I put it out there? Is Alphonso Davies okay? He took like a heck of a headbutt from Lucas Cavallini after he scored his hat trick goal. What the heck was that? But no, we can definitely bring Gavin on.
All right, here we go. There he is. Sorry, I had to rush it because my finger's been hovering over the add button, and I don't. It's been a while since I've produced this thing while I've been in it. So, crisis averted.
Gavin, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for
having me.
Always glad to chat. Yeah, it's been a while. How's everybody?
Great, Gavin.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I don't think we've had the pleasure yet, but thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I always, it's been a while since I've really been back in the game, so it's nice to always chat about what's going on in this sort of part of the world.
Yeah, joined by, of course, Gavin Day, host of Newspaper on Seats podcast, as well as all things CONCACAF and Canadian soccer. So much experience, and because I know we'll get here, Gavin, you always tell me, and it's a great point, don't get too high on this team until they win games down in Central America. That's really what it's going to come down to over the next couple of years. If they can do that, it's not going to get much easier for Canada than it is these past two games, is it? I mean, no crowds. They're playing in Florida. It's not particularly hot right now. It's about as easy as you can expect, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you just hit the nail on the head there. It's always going to come down to road form against better teams. All due respect to the opponents they just played, but anything other than large wins would have been, a cause for concern. These were supposed to be the games where you're like in rookie mode in FIFA, running up the score, looking very good at the same time, but at the same time you're playing, Alphonso Davies, Bayern Munich against, a guy with Robin Hood FC. There's always going to be one outcome. All due respect to Robin Hood FC, but even when it comes down to it, Canada should do well at home. They get results at home. But until such a time that they can prove it, that they can go into Central America, even the Caribbean, the better sides there, in hostile territory, uneven playing surfaces, wonky preparations, fans and opponents throwing whatever they can at them, I'm not going to be convinced. So that's what it takes. Even Haiti, should it get that far in June, is going to be an interesting challenge. And that, that's going to be a big first test. And if they can come away with a result, looking far ahead in Haiti, looking good, then you'll start to think, okay, this is something. But it is the ultimate equalizer going away to those parts of the world. You look at what the U.S., they failed to do against Trinidad. So, it's looking ahead, but that is going to be the big decider.
Yeah, you kind of touched on it there, Gavin. Who are some of those teams that you believe are Canada's biggest competitors in terms of cracking through?
I still will say that San Pedro Sula, Honduras is the most intense atmosphere I've been in. Having done it, I mean, I've been there 4 times now, and twice were for youth tournaments when there wasn't much of an attendance. Twice were for the men's national team. And when it's 44,000 fans in the heat of the day, they're there for hours in advance, just getting into a frenzy. There's stuff outside, there's fans inside, and it's just nonstop in the run up to the game. It's bonkers. And, the players have walked in and fans are sort of right above them in the tunnel. I remember at halftime, and the last time they were there, Scott Arfield was getting into it with fans and they were shouting something at each other, and it was hilarious. But it is, I compare it to when they played it. I compare it to when they played at Azteca, and it just wasn't the same. And, it wasn't Azteca at its fullest, but that will remain the gold standard for me in terms of they know what to do. They declare it a national holiday. The back of the newspaper says the president of the country invites you to watch this with, they have these viewing parties. They have, they know how to do it, and fire code be damned. They cram into that stadium, and it's, to be on the field in that game, I can only imagine. But yeah, we're in the thick of it. So maybe we have this sort of, unique view where you're in the middle of this firestorm that's directed right at the field. Obviously there is a running track, so there is a bit of separation, but it's unique. And also in the fact that they always put it in the smack dab middle of the day when it's, 35 degrees in the shade, never mind the humidity.
Take notes, Canada. Take
notes. Yeah.
So
just let me set the scene. So were you standing on the field to cover this particular game, or did you
No.
get seats in somewhere?
Yeah, there is a press row, but I mean, you're with any of these stadiums in Central America, the fans are right there, and they're all around you. They're sitting in the aisles. There's usually some sort of security with heavy automatic weaponry right nearby. But the day before the game, you get to be on the field, and you get to sort of you look up, and that's where you just imagine. I mean, the players can explain better that experience of being on the field in that kind of cauldron. But for us, we get there early. Just because if you're getting there closer to the game, you're trying to navigate through a maze of humanity that's just crammed in there. So you get there early, you stake out your spot. Fortunately, we've been there with a crew of other journalists before who's gotten there. And then you just hunker down and you get ready for hours. You enjoy the last few minutes of Wi-Fi before the signal's lost once the stadium is full. And you alert the desk that you're going to likely be filing not directly at full time because you just can't. Right. And then you wait. And then, first when the players walk out, the whistles are directed at them. Like they walk out for their sort of walk around before they get changed, before their warm up. And then that's when, the whistles start and all kinds of stuff is directed at them. I never noticed, there are the stories of stuff being thrown. I've never noticed anything, but, they're also far enough away that they're not going to be hit with anything. But it's just, you sit and you wait. You await the door, and it's just one of those surreal things where you have the time to get your bearings, and it throws you off just as much as the players because it's completely different. In North America, you're sitting up at the press box, everything is comfy, you likely get a meal.
I got my pizza behind me. Yeah,
exactly. And this, you're sort of halfway down, there's people right in front of you. There's the vendors in the stands where you can likely buy from. But I mean, the guys who are in the field are the broadcasters. So when Sportsnet, the infamous 8-1 game, there was Arash Madani on the field, and he has his own stories of craziness. But it's one of those things that just appeals to all senses. And then once the game starts, you have to focus on that as best you can, even though you want to, let your mind wander, let your eyes wander, and just soak it in because it's a surreal experience.
See, I imagine you miss all the bags being thrown because at that point is when your empty seats and your sight line disappears because you were lucky enough to have a 7'5" guy sit in front of you. Like every other concert and seated event I've ever been to that I arrive early at, I always win the lottery, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's it. I mean, the stories that I've heard, there was one of the kit managers, I think from I think it was the 8-1 game. I sort of am lost in my timeline, as we have all lost this concept of time this last year. And he said this story when they were walking in, because there's a big tunnel where the bus drives in. And when they were walking in, I think he said like a chicken carcass was thrown at them. I cannot verify that claim, but that's the story that I remember. So to make it sound tough, I don't know. But, it's another world. I mean, other places, El Salvador was different. The stadium wasn't full, but there's this one stand called Vietnam, and it runs along the far side, along one of the sidelines. And we don't know why it's called Vietnam. You try to ask, nobody is, but they're literally like, if you're smart, women don't go there because guys get, I'm not saying there's anything. But there are guys who get grabby and whistle, and it's just like
looking for trouble. Exactly.
It's drunk guys out for a time and
exactly.
They get their moments. So it's like it's just a whole other world. And then you compare that with the relatively friendly, Caribbean stadiums, or a place like Belize where it's just completely different. But they're the places that know that they are a difference maker, and they ramp it up, and
they've embraced the chaos. Amazing.
Oh, exactly. It's surreal.
Yeah.
Gavin, I wanted to switch gears here a tiny bit and talk about Olympic qualifying because, this year is obviously heavily different with COVID-19 and everything and how that changed preparations. But even in normal years, for Canada coming into these tournaments, they always seem like they're starting behind the 8 ball a little bit because, none of these guys have really played together much before. They're coming in from all different corners of the world. Whereas you look at a Mexican team, and I think they played it was something like I don't know, 10 or 11 games together at minimum over the past couple of years. And that's even with the pandemic going on. So, you know, you having been in camp, what is that like? And what's maybe the chaos a little bit of trying to get everyone integrated into one side and ready for a tournament like this, where you're playing sides that have played, you know, multiple games together already?
Yeah, it's sort of the story for any youth tournament where, you know, it's always a battle of getting who you can get. And I remember, you know, I look back, like there was one U20 tournament where I was still working for the Federation, and, you know, Rob Gale was coach at the time, and he's trying to get guys like Dylan Carrero in. The club won't play ball. And, you know, there's always this drama of, especially when they are not international breaks officially. This one I think did kind of fall into it, but it's always the matter of youth tournaments where, especially the U20s, they're always in the winter when guys are not in season, and they have to somehow figure out a way to do that. Olympic qualifying, there's such a little margin of error where, you know, there's no pre-tournament, there's no warm-up, it's not like a World Cup qualifying campaign where you can sort of get trained. There's a couple of games, you have to be on it. And it's always so tough when you, like you said, they're up against teams who are in season and have the resources to, you know, prepare properly, especially, you know, again, with the pandemic where you're juggling quarantines and travel restrictions and, you know, and then clubs these days not necessarily wanting to play ball, risking their players going over abroad where they can come back with a virus or where they have to quarantine. So it's never ideal. And it's the reality of the situation where you can complain about it or you can just sort of, you know, do the best you can. And you sort of, when they announced that squad, you know, of course there were big names who were eligible who were never going to play for it. And that's the reality. But, you know, when Haiti sort of had their own drama pre-tournament where, you know, they had 10 guys and then the goalie runs in at halftime.
Could have cost Canada.
I've covered enough youth tournaments where there's always one of these teams that has some sort of travel odyssey, and it's usually where they're like you know, their stuff gets sent to Martinique and they're trying to get some, and they connected like 3 times in random airports, and I think that comes down to the Federation more than anything. And like it's the story of every youth tournament I've covered where there is this one team where it's like, yeah, we just got in yesterday, our stuff just showed up now, kind of thing. And you know, there's always, you know, I don't know if this is uniquely CONCACAF. I imagine it's elsewhere. You know, the stories that I've heard, I'll plug our own, the show that I've had talking to Richard Fleming, and he talked about the 2002 Africa Cup of Nations in Mali. And his story,
that's a good episode.
I loved chatting with him. We could have gone on for hours, and he's an incredible storyteller. But, you know, you'd have to think that there are probably similar stories there of teams not getting their gear. But it's, for having so much on the line, like an Olympic berth, it is sort of weird to do it. But yeah, I mean, for the last qualifying campaign, when I was still working with the organization, there was a pre-camp up at Nottawasaga in Alliston, north of here. So they had a decent amount of time, all things considered. And then they went right into the games. But the calendar is not their friend ever, especially this time of year. And it's a matter of, it's just a matter of trying to do the best they can. And it didn't, you know, for the last Olympics, it was in the fall, so guys were still relatively in season. This one, it's in January when they're not. And so if ever there was consistency in the calendar, they can sort of say, okay, based on the previous experience, this is what we should do next time. And I'm just not sure what could have gone into it this time.
Yeah.
That's sort of my next question there, Gavin, is with the depth that we're seeing, you know, in Canada. You know, it's not just on the men's national team, and we can argue that probably wasn't their best Olympic team they put forward. But do you think that the men's national team or Canada Soccer should put more of an emphasis on that U23 team moving forward? Because, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the thought that cropped into my head is when they had a January camp, and wasn't it a mix? There was a mix of both of them. And the thought that popped into my head was, all due respect to the opposition that the men's national team played in or against, you likely could have done less of a preparation. A January camp with an Olympic team focus is, I'm just sort of curious as to why that wasn't done, because you know the time was going to be limited with that Olympic team. You know they had to peak at the moment, at one moment. And so given that there was a little bit more wiggle room with the senior team, I'm not sure why they didn't do that January camp with an Olympic focus. That being said, I don't know how camps are put together. I don't know budgets. I don't know any of that, especially with a year of inactivity. I don't know where the budgetary constraints are, and that's always something to focus on. But it's always, given that it's the Olympic team for the longest time, it was always kind of, given that it's every 4 years, it's different from the every 2 years of the U17 and U20. So I know they focused on it from what I've sort of read and understood, that the Olympics was a major priority. But if it was up to me, I would have said, okay, let's get them together, January camp, Florida, Olympic focused, and drill into what they're going to be working on. Because again, you hear about there was the TFC COVID issue, players coming in and trying to learn on the fly. And so that's, if it's up to me, give them an extra camp, a couple weeks, opponents, so that they know come March what they're, a little bit better idea of what they're doing.
I agree.
Yeah. You've sort of answered my question already, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In your opinion, is this the deepest and strongest Canada pool ever, or is it just recency bias? And I'm pretty sure I already know what you're going to say.
Well, attacking wise, yes. I mean, that's always been the issue, is goal scoring. I think defensively they might have been stronger in recent years, but that is sort of the main concern. We haven't, we saw them against the US last year where they leaked in a couple goals. Was that last year? No, it was 2019, wasn't it? Oh boy.
What are years?
So attacking wise, it's the most gifted ever. And so you sort of think about, you almost imagine pairing up some of the strong defenses that Canada's had in years past with the gifted attacking talent they have now. And man, what a team that would be.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying I'm not saying they're weak defensively. It's just, it sort of seems to have tipped a little bit more offensively. And that's where, going on the road is going to come into play, where, you're not going to get such easy goals, and then it's going to come down to defending. And, but yeah, I mean, you're gifted with goals these days, and it's, if you're loving attacking soccer on a Canadian team, you're sort of rubbing your eyes a second time and being like, oh, they put in a couple goals. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, a couple.
Gold Cup a couple. And they'll have the Gold Cup this summer, which, will land them 1 or 2 games where they should be able to put in a few again. And, but yeah, it's, but you sort of can't help shake but the feeling that, you lose the likes of Davies and David to an injury crisis, God forbid. And there are some more options, and, of course, not necessarily at their level, but certainly a step above what there has been in the past.
Yeah. I agree with that.
They're all playing for teams at least too. That
yeah.
I mean, that makes sense.
No more unattached.
I mean, you look back at how it's been previously, and just by the nature of the player pool, you're bringing in unattached FC, and you have no other choice. And I always remember when Colin Miller was interim coach, and it's like, what are you trying to get out of this national team camp? And it's like, well, it's a chance for guys to put themselves in the shop window and find a club. And it's just like, it's got to be the only national team in the world to be saying that. Of course, now with Canada having its own league, there are guys who have places to land, which is an absolute blessing to the program. But it's just sort of the weirdest time to be covering a program, and there are guys like, looking for a new team to play for, and hopefully this national team experience will do that. And it's just like, what is going on?
We get 3 square meals, open bar, bed to keep but aren't you here for soccer? What's that all about? Yeah. You're up, Mike, if you got a question.
For sure. And Gavin, before this, as I said, like, we haven't really crossed paths yet, so I did a little bit of digging, and I went on. And I've seen, man, you've done it all. The amount of places that you've worked for, you've covered soccer for, you've covered other things for, is incredible, quite honestly. And my question is, if you have any advice to a young journalist kind of break into the industry, what would it be?
Just be there. Because when I moved here, I've been freelance largely for the most part since I've been in Toronto, and I moved here in 2011. And I'd freelanced before, largely for the Canadian Press. So I'll give all kinds of credit to Neil Davidson for giving me a shot back in the early days. And I was doing, some other sports as well. And then when I said, I'll do some soccer away, he was like, yeah, sure, we'll take some stuff. He's not the editor anymore, but when he was, he gave, the chances to. I'd worked for him for CP a couple times before that. And so they knew who I was. But I've largely been freelance since I moved to Toronto, with a couple chunks in between. I'm more in news these days. It's just where the chips have fallen, where I'm doing some radio news anchoring and some TV writing, just by the nature of the business. But yeah, when I moved here, I just sort of jumped right into it, where, I'll give credit to the guys at Red Nation Online, which isn't really up and running much these days, but those guys also, supported some of the stuff that I was doing. And so by nature of being there, having someone to work for in the early days, and then sort of being the only guy to sort of say, I'm going to go to St. Kitts, I'm going to go to St. Lucia, and cobbling, it wasn't making tons of money, but by sort of cobbling together enough work, by making contacts, by talking to other journalists, by getting to know them, and then saying, this is what I plan to do. You put your work out there, and then other people notice it. And so then you have something to sort of say, this is what I've done. Mm-hmm. And when you make pitches, you sort of say, this is what I've done in the past. This is what I can do. And so by just continually practicing what you're doing, and also talking to people who are there, you bear yourself out there a little bit. And when budgets change and times change. And so sometimes you might lose contacts that you're working for, and then you readjust. And so it's a lot of working just to get the work. And I love the travel that I've done in the early days, when I was just kind of making ends meet and doing enough to cover my costs and a little bit more, and just sort of trying, there might come a time where you get enough work, and you try not to take on too much more and bury yourself, and just sort of, you lose those contacts. So it's sort of a weird roundabout way of saying, just sort of, being there, putting a name to a face, or a face to a name, and then just sort of leaving yourself out there by saying, hey, what are the opportunities that I could get, doing something for you? And so having a couple people to work on work for in the early days, allowed me to build up a bit of a portfolio. And then, sort of getting new contacts from the people I've met, and making pitches to them and saying, this is what I have done, this is what I can do. And then, there will be people who sort of say, yeah, let's give this a shot. And then it sort of rolls downhill from there. If you're willing to work hard, good things can happen.
Yeah, and you mentioned like going to CONCACAF, like that was your sort of in, like there weren't many people who were willing to go down to St. Kitts, St. Lucia. And for any young journalists watching this, like the Canadian Premier League's a big market that still needs to be tackled a lot. Women's soccer is a great market that still needs to be tackled a lot. Mm-hmm. Like there are niches there that need to be filled. Find that niche and run with it. Try not to spread yourself a little bit too thin, because hey, there are many ways to get your foot in the door. Once you're in the door, then perhaps you can expand. So just building off what Gavin said, I think that's
absolutely. Yeah, there's just, you find your niche. And yeah, like you said, nobody was doing the travel in the early days. And so I, go to a few people saying, this is what I can do. And then you also learn stuff like, how to travel on the cheap. And I've couch surfed before. I've slept in JFK Airport when I had an overnight layover. You learn a lot about yourself, and it's just, it's not stuff they really teach, and you sort of have to learn on the fly. But if you find something that you really enjoy, and you sort of drive that wedge in there to open the door a little bit, you'd be surprised at what opens up. Yeah. I mean, there's, in the freelance world, I've worked for, a lot of people, and there, I'll thank a lot of people who sort of said, yeah, let's give this guy a shot. And, you roll with it from there. It's not going to be a moneymaker, but you'll learn a lot about yourself, and then you'll have some pretty awesome experiences along the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Really. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. It just segues into my next question, which was, in my travels, I found there are a lot of knock-on benefits to being Canadian when you face, admin issues or logistical problems or just even, casual conversations on the street. This is a roundabout way of plugging your excellent podcast because I really dig it. Would you say that there's a truth to that, and that being Canadian has certainly greased the wheels of some awkward situations in the past?
Yeah, I mean, trying to think about anything. Yeah, for those of you, I'll plug it to newspapers on seats. I talked with Dan Rouse from The Score. We just missed travel in the last year. And so it's us essentially sitting and having a beer and sharing travel stories that soccer has brought us to. And we've also had
sitting and having an IPA. You are pretty heavy on the IPAs.
No, that's Dan. I like my darker stuff.
Okay.
And yeah, and then we have other people who have, traveled to other places, and it just opens our minds to what's, where other places to go once we're allowed to get back out. But yeah, I mean, everybody likes a Canadian kind of thing. So it was just funny, like in Panama, again, another place where they're sitting right in front of us. And if you watch the Panamanian games, they're famous for their beer baths when they score. And so right before that 8-1 game, when Canada lost 2-0 in Panama the month before, I for the life of me, I swear people knew that we were back there and aimed it back at us. So the first goal, we were sort of caught off guard. The second goal, we were like, oh, here it comes, and we hide our laptop.
Goggles on.
Exactly. But then after the game, they come back, fans come back and shake our hands. And then they go, you Honduras. And they're, if you're just listening, they do the throat slap gesture. And we're like, we'll do the best we can. So it's just, yeah, I mean, people can't help but like us. And so even after games, during games is a whole other story where, fans in particular are, aware of everything. But then afterwards, everyone, it's hard not to like us. So, yeah, it's certainly an interesting experience, especially going abroad and being in a different environment. I'll never forget, people know, I kind of know automatically that we're approachable. When I was working for the CSA and we were in the Czech Republic for that friendly there, the one I think it was another 2-3-0 loss. Peter Cech was in goal for the Czechs, and Canada was it was in the doldrums at that point. They were in the 100 somethings in the rankings.
Did Biro miss a penalty that game?
They missed a penalty. They had a set piece that led to a shot on goal.
Nice.
It was actually a really nice set piece. The Czechs stole it and used it the next month against the Dutch, and we were all like, "Hey, that's ours." Anyway, because they had their moments, and one of these Czech journalists, he sort of leans over and casually, gives me an elbow, and he points to Canada's ranking, and I'm like, "Meh," and he's like he was like, "This is a better than a 120 team kind of thing."
Yeah,
You're casual enough to sort of be like, "Yeah." And so my first ever experience really going away was to Argentina ahead of the 2010 World Cup. And, being in the press box there, being the only, Canadian journalist there, it was a very makeshift Canadian team. I always love to say, they brought back Daniel Imhoff after he had retired and he played this one game and then left. And it was outside the window. It wasn't an international break. And they did the best they can cobbling together the team. It was 5 or 6-0, something like that. And
played for Argentina that day.
Oh God, I can tell you that Adam Straith played for Canada. It was his debut, and Jamie Peters. I think De Guzman was there. For Argentina, I could not name their lineup. I was just how old was I? 24 at the time. Just stars in my eyes looking at it. I know Maradona was coaching, so it was a whole other world. I think Messi did get out there. But
that's really what he was asking.
Maybe
Messi. But again, there's this guy next to me. He's all in a suit, and I'm in a t-shirt and whatever. And he sort of shows me the Canadian lineup. I don't know if this was pregame or during the game, but he was easily casually enough to just sort of be like, "Is this Canada's best team?" And I'm like, no. So there's always people are always sort of a little more at ease in chatting with us, and it just makes the whole going abroad prospect that much more fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Before we let you go here, Gavin, I did want to ask one last question, which is about a recent debate on Canadian soccer Twitter surrounding where the national team games are played, that being One Soccer. I remember a time when Canada games were yourself calling them and filming on a camera, and those were great for all their own reasons. But what are your thoughts on kind of the debate as to whether these games should be on bigger platforms? Obviously, it's not even a debate. I mean, these games are going to be played where they are.
Mhm.
And your thoughts on, I guess, One Soccer in general and the opportunity they provided the national teams.
That's the name of the game these days is, there's streaming services for everything. I mean, I love watching the Tour de France. It's not on TV anymore. I have to subscribe to a streaming service for it. And I'm happy to do it. If the team's winning, if they get to that last round and are playing the likes of US and Mexico, do not be surprised if they sub-license to, a major network. It's just, the audience has to be there. TV is a business, and your TSNs, your sports nets, they run the show, and they want to put on content that's going to get the most audience. And right now, Canada playing the Cayman Islands is not going to attract a lot of viewers. And so, all credit to the likes of One Soccer for existing. That's just the way it is. Because, well, I mean, yeah, again, you point to the last qualifying cycle. It started with Mad Bull and Maestro in Belize, essentially. Sorry. Before that, there was me and a camera in Dominica, straddling, a couple rows in front of the real press box because I was kicked out because the radio guys needed it. And there's me doing this and holding a microphone. That's how it started 4 years ago. And, a little humble brag, I'd like to think that because of that, they need to stream all their friendlies now. You got a full-on broadcast of a World Cup qualifier. It cost you a couple bucks. Suck it up. That's the way it is. And we always say, why doesn't this get more coverage? Why doesn't this get more coverage? Every national sport organization in Canada would love to have their product on TV, but it doesn't attract the eyeballs outside of World Cup and Olympics. And I'm a huge volleyball guy, but you're likely just going to stream it online. We had an Olympic qualifier last year that I did the commentary for before the pandemic hit, and it was all streamed online, and it was riveting stuff. So it's just the name of the game. And you look at, why isn't there more coverage of the Canadian women's team? Why isn't there more coverage of this? People have to read it. People have to watch it, and then it'll drive the odds. It's just the nature of business. And, provided this team keeps moving on, if, there was a lot of goodwill built up that year they lost 8-1. From what I heard, it was attracting huge audiences to Sportsnet. 8-1 happens, and then the momentum.
Everybody gets snake bitten. Yeah.
If they qualify for a World Cup, there's going to be an audience for a while.
Very well
there
put.
You go. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us today, Gavin. It's been much appreciated.
I'd like to chat about this again.
No, absolutely. We'll have you
Definitely.
back. Thank you so much. We appreciated all the stories, and we'll speak to you soon.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thanks,
Awesome.
Gavin.
Well, yeah, I think we should pick up the discussion from there on the whole One Soccer thing. So I think there's plenty more points to be made, especially since we found out at halftime of yesterday's game that the CONCACAF Champions League games will be played on One Soccer as well. So if you haven't subscribed already, there's another reason for you to do so. Jeff, you look like you have a point.
I have Steven Sandor expressed it pretty eloquently, so I'm just going to read a little bit of a thread he posted on the 28th. And I'm paraphrasing, but they're not willing to pay for it. This goes back to an argument I used to hear from advertisers when I ran the 11/plastic pitch. What is the point of advertising to people not willing to pay for something? There's no point in marketing anything to people who refuse to pay for stuff. Demographics. Goes on. Imagine being a shoe manufacturer and you're told that there's a chance to market $200 shoes, except that the audience has a tendency to say, I'd watch this event even if I didn't have to pay for it. And then your marketing firm looks further and notices, wow, this group shares a lot of pirate streams online. And then you recognize that they celebrate not paying for stuff. Sponsorship is about selling stuff to the audience. Economics 101 takes over. What even better is that said people in the CanSoc community will actually tweet and ask the broadcasters who try to make their living in the business why the game isn't free. It's basically telling people to their faces that they don't deserve a job. And I agree wholeheartedly with that.
Yeah, that's some great points there by Steve. The one thing I just really wanted to emphasize is the blame should not be on One Soccer. I know a lot of people are like, One Soccer, why are we having to pay for you? Guys, One Soccer is the one that's picking everybody else up. One Soccer is the one who stepped in when nobody else would. So if you want to point your anger, your frustration, whatever it is, your disappointment towards people, it should be the major media companies like TSN, Sportsnet, because whatever, 2-3 years ago when all of this went down, when all these broadcast rights still went down and Media Pro stepped in for One Soccer, TSN and Sportsnet had the opportunity to see what was in front of them, to see what was on the horizon in terms of the growth of Canada soccer in this country. And you know what? They decided not to step up to the plate at that time, and therefore One Soccer swooped in, and they've been providing some excellent pregame coverage, excellent postgame coverage, excellent even during the broadcast. I honestly think that their pregame coverage has been better than Toronto FC's pregame coverage for TSN. So if you're complaining about paying a few bucks for content, I mean, these are the guys you should be supporting. You know, cut down your cable TV subscriptions if that's the case.
It's like one Starbucks coffee.
Yeah,
well, that's the other thing. I mean, this supposition that it's free on TSN or Sportsnet, it isn't. You're paying for cable, like just because you've been doing it for decades, and it's like the gym membership. You know, well now One Soccer is kind of the gym membership. So, you know, it adapt or die. Honestly, like if it was $400,000 a second, then I would understand the reluctance to pay for it. But we're not talking about, billions upon billions of dollars. So I think that. The argument is a little nuts. That's just me.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people's frustrations stem from. It's the few extra bucks, but you have to pull back the curtain and realize that, as Will Dunn's saying, yeah, we need to thank our lucky stars that One Soccer even exists right now. Because if it wasn't for One Soccer, where would these games be playing? Would it be that single camera from Canada Soccer again? Because I get it. Like the One Soccer broadcast isn't perfect, but it's miles ahead of what we used to have to go through and used to watch for some of these games. So again, I think we need to thank One Soccer for what they're doing, what they continue to do. And I think April 7th, we might have to revisit this conversation when Toronto FC play Club League.
Oh no, I think I'm going to turn off Twitter that day, but
people are asking where the heck is this game right now? But hey, like Mitch said, it's a few bucks, and it's a few bucks going towards people who are like us. They're trying to grow the game in this country. They're doing everything they can, not only on One Soccer's platform when they're on there, but everything in between that they do to help grow the game in this country, to help one day get this game on television. And hey, one day One Soccer might even become a television network if they get enough of us supporting them. So it comes down to us supporting the beautiful game in our country. And again, it's just a few bucks if you can. I understand it's another expense on top of many expenses. But if there's some wiggle room, I'd say, support One Soccer.
I find the question so infuriating. It's like, where can I watch this game? We all know where you can watch the game. You just don't want to pay to watch the game. So ask the right question. It's not where is the game? Like it's some eternal mystery. That question, there's an answer to that question, and you know the answer to that question. So at least be honest. And then when saying why can't I get it for free? Well, that's flawed logic because it's not free on Sportsnet and TSN. So again, where does the question? How far does the rabbit hole go? Is there an answer that satisfies? And if there isn't, why are we just sitting around yelling at each other? And that's I think that's where we're coming a little bit. But like I said.
Yeah, with all that being said, yes, we want the games on TV. Like it's a tragedy that Alphonso Davies, who is a global icon worth millions, worth more than probably any athlete in North America, we're not providing him coverage on TV, let alone the hundreds, even if you call it, kids that are coming through that are going to be sort of similar to that level. We can talk about Theo Corbeanu and what he's doing with Wolverhampton. Like, we need to get eyes on this Canada soccer team. Casual viewers who are, scrolling through their television, they see Canada soccer on. Hey, people are talking about this. Let me see what this is all about. And then you see them defeat a team 11-0. Like, okay, this hype is real. Let's get excited. How are they going to do their next World Cup match? The casual we're going to be missing out on. But with that being said, all of us diehards here who do support, the game, let's support One Soccer again.
Yeah, look at this recency bias. Ryan here is saying, and when they have Hume on, you get the kind of spicy language you'd never hear on TSN. That's worth a few bucks on its own. I'll see your Hume, and I'll raise you Alejandro Pozuelo on the field with the Sir Christian Jack for spicy language.
That's fair, yeah.
What did Will Dunn say? He said, once we get to the point where people are cheering for Canada in the World Cup versus other countries, oh my God, or their ancestors are originally from, this will be the state of coverage of our national team. Right now, the ratings just aren't there. Well, I mean, it's a chicken or egg situation, right? Like the ratings will never be there if there's a metric that, TSN or Sportsnet needs to achieve in order to buy in right now because of the way that it works. So, everything's being disrupted. Uber's destroyed taxi cabs, Airbnb's destroyed hotels. There's disruptions all across media and finance and business and games stocks or what, stonks or whatever. So, we're just living through a sea change in almost all aspects of how we conduct ourselves. So the goalposts have to change. The content is there. It's behind a paywall, but how long are we going to rage against that, and before we just realize that that's the world we live in right now and adapt or die?
Yeah, I think it's also some kind of recency bias as well, because let's not forget, like Gavin mentioned, like the single camera feed was actually a massive improvement over when I started watching the Canadian men's national team. You were only going to get to watch Canada if they're playing in a Gold Cup or a later round World Cup qualifiers. Otherwise, you had to hope that the local broadcaster in San Lucia or whatever would be picking it up. I remember listening to radio feeds of games. It used to be a whole ordeal to even find a feed. Now it's super easy. You know where it's going to be. They're going to have a dedicated show built around these games. To me, that's what grows the game is having those conversations and having and giving these games what they deserve in terms of treatment versus
very well
potentially just having a game simulcast on TSN or Sportsnet. And obviously eventually we want to get to a point where it's that dedicated feed on TSN or Sportsnet, but right now I think we're in not a bad position. I think that all this hand wringing and such is it just doesn't make sense to me, considering where Canada Soccer's come from in their recent past, and obviously we know where they're going. We hope they get there, but at the moment I think they're in a good spot.
I also don't buy that the ratings just aren't there for TSN or Sportsnet to provide live coverage. If you see some of the stuff that TSN Sportsnet show on, you're telling me Canada Soccer is not going to have more views than that. Also, TSN Sportsnet have 4 or 5 channels. I mean, I'm sure they can, squeeze out one channel to provide coverage for this game. I think perhaps at the time when they made the media deal, it was short-sighted and they didn't see what was ahead of them. And, at the time, it might have not have been the greatest time for ratings. But I think TSN Sportsnet are sort of kicking themselves right now that they don't have some of these games. Because, we're in it, so it's a little bit biased of us. But I still think that people are super interested to see what's going on with Alphonso Davies playing on the Canadian national team. This is a global icon. How can this guy perform now when he comes back home and plays for Canada? It's a measuring stick for a lot of people who, even the casual viewer who hear a lot about Alphonso Davies but don't get to see him.
Yep.
It's for me it seems like, again, this is a play that worked out for TSN or Sportsnet long term. I think One Soccer swooped in and they're reaping the rewards right now, the benefits, and hey, fair play to them.
Yeah, fair play to them. Absolutely.
And I think TSN has the next 2 even World Cup rights as well, so there could be a point here where we see some of those One Soccer simulcasts just because they want to build up, some momentum for those properties. So don't be surprised if something like that happens, especially, as we said, if Canada can go deep and get to that octagonal and, be playing the United States and Mexico in big, important games. Obviously, that's what we're all hoping for. That's what we're all moving towards. So hopefully we can get there at some point soon. But let's move on to a little bit to talk about Olympic qualifying. I don't think there's too much more to touch on here, but I wanted to at least acknowledge it. And, Canada not qualifying for the Olympics, certainly a missed opportunity. I mean, we talked with Gavin at length about some of the things they went through and how, Canada's always at a bit of a disadvantage in these tournaments. But, even conversations with casual soccer fans, there's not that understanding at least in Canada, of the difference between the Olympics and the World Cup, or like how much more important the World Cup is than Olympic qualifying, right? So when fans see Canada misses out, like casual fans see Canada misses out on that Olympic qualifying, there's a level of,
just again, again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like everyone's been hearing through the grapevine that, Canada soccer is moving up and trending upwards, and then they miss out on another tournament that seems to the casual fan very important. It didn't, it just doesn't look great. I think some good individual performances would be my take, but I think as a team, they never really came together. And Jeff, you mentioned it, the attacking side of things got pretty disappointing towards the end, I think.
Yeah, everyone wanted to be a superstar, and they forgot. I mean, what was the play that we were all talking about endlessly? The one where Diaz was waiting for a ball back and then just like lost it because what was it? He like fed a through ball to, I don't remember the play, but I do remember.
It was Brem. Yeah, Brem tried to take on four guys instead of just squaring it back to Diaz. Diaz had beat like 3 players. So
yeah, and I think that's too much of that. That's very much a microcosm of what I found wrong. I thought they were great the first game out. But I take a lot more positive out of that than negative. We were able to hang with Mexico for a decent part of that game, regardless of our faults. And that's the positive that I take out of that. I was expecting an 11-0 the other way around. So, the fact that it was close and the fact that we didn't embarrass ourselves out there, because if you look at the quality gap, if you look at the budgetary gap, I don't remember the figures, but they were throwing out some numbers on One Soccer in the pregame show that made all the hairs on the back of my neck stand out. Like just the amount of professional minutes on the Mexican under 23s versus the amount of professional minutes in total on the Canadian U23s was a staggering amount of difference. So,
and the levels those come at too.
Yeah, that's probably a realistic take. But for me, man, I see there's no reason why Canada cannot qualify in that tournament. I think that if they could have beat Honduras, I mean, could they have put out a stronger squad, like bring in a stronger squad potentially? But as you guys said, like this is a hit towards the casual fan who see Canada not make the Olympics, and like we said, like, oh no, not this again. And I think even Tim McAuliffe had a good tweet where it's like, it seems inevitable that Canada will hype us up and then disappoint us in the end. I mean, that's sort of the narrative that's coming away from this tournament. And yes, Mexico is the better side than us. I just wonder, how much were we missing some of those TFC guys, and how much of a difference could they have made should they have been in the tournament? And if we look back to that Honduras match where they drew 1-1, could they have beat that Honduras team? I think if Canada's taken this tournament a little bit more seriously, if they have a little bit more in that squad, I think they beat Honduras's U23 team for sure. And that Mexico game, fair play to Mexico. Even if Canada had some of the TFC guys had some better players, like it still would have been a tight game, but it would have given Canada a better shot at advancing through this tournament. It just feels like it's a tournament they didn't take as seriously as I personally wanted them to, because it is sort of baby steps here in Canada soccer. We haven't qualified for the Olympics in 37 years. Let's take that first step. Let's get that huge milestone, because that would draw so much more interest, so many more viewers. And again, we have to wait 4 years for that to happen. Alphonso Davies will be like 24 when that happens, for example. Like they're players who are missing that opportunity to come in and
fair
be
point.
Stars for this U23 team. So for me, the bar has to be held higher by the CSA. I expect more out of Canada soccer moving forward, and that's just the standard that I really believe in this team and the players in this country, because when you talk to them, there's a real belief that they could do better.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the prevailing thought coming out of this international window in general for Canada, is that there was definitely a lot of positives, but they still haven't proven anything. And I think until they really prove that they can compete with the best in this region, then sure, it's maybe better than it was, but it's still not where it needs to be for them to be where we believe that this talent can take them. So certainly a good point there, I think.
Definitely.
Let's move on. Let's talk some quickly. I know it's a longer show, but let's get some TFC in here because we know we got
TFC
some
talk. Yep.
TFC diehards in here, and we appreciate you
we don't
guys
want to
hanging
get any
with us.
copyright problems there, Jeff.
Yeah, so I guess the first bit of TFC news that broke this week was Bore, and it looks like he'll be heading down to Brazil.
Wah, wah.
Yeah. What did you guys make of that sort of news, and how do you feel about it?
I'm fine.
I don't know if we've ever talked more about a player who didn't end up playing for Toronto FC than we did about Bore. I think just the way this offseason went and the fact that there was such a shortage of rumors other than this one, which kept cropping up. Like, yeah.
Juan Agudelo.
maybe
That's
Juan
the thing.
Agudelo.
That's the thing. That's a good point, Mitch. Like, TFC's front office has been on record saying that they're not going to comment on the rumors or anything like that. So yes, Bore was the only name. I think we had Alex come out here and he's like, why is Bore the only name that TFC's targeting? Guys, Bore is not the only name TFC's targeting. It's just the only one that's sort of leaked out and that we're talking about. TFC, they're doing their homework. And that they have, I'm sure, as we've heard in the past, they've come up with lists of like 30 players who are on their list of potential targets. Like TFC has an extensive list of players. They're doing their homework. And Bill Manning said when he was on our show last week, they're going to take their time with this. They have towards the end of the summer there, or end of the spring, almost towards June for that first transfer window, since it just got extended. So they have more time, and they also believe in their squad to get them there. So there's no need for them to rush anything. I think they're going to see how some of their young guns play out, how some of their forwards play out. How is Josie going to bounce back next season? How's Michael Bradley going to look playing higher up the field? A lot of these question marks with the squad, with the new coach. So let's give TSC a little bit of a sample size, and then from there they can better address their needs. What exactly is it do they need? Do they need that Nico Ladero who can provide the final pass for some of their strikers? They need someone who will get on the end of the ball. There's different types of areas where TFC can address, but let's just wait so we get a sample size.
I agree. I'm not worried.
Yeah. Yvonne brought up an interesting point that kind of relates to Toronto FC and sorry, did I cut out there?
Yeah, a little
you're
bit.
good.
Don't worry about it. Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, no, Yvonne brought up an interesting point that relates to both Toronto FC and the Olympics, which is that neither Canada nor the United States qualified. And we'd heard in the past that might have been one of the contingencies upon which Io Akinola was making his international decision. Was if one of these countries goes to the Olympics, then he'd probably be favored to play for them because the opportunity that would give him. So that's at least something to watch in the next little bit. The other thing, of course, is the reemergence of Kyle Larin and what that means for Canada's striking depth chart. But it's at least something to watch, and a good point by Yvonne that, maybe this is something that favors Canada in the sense that, well, it wouldn't have favored Canada if they made the Olympics. That obviously would have been a huge boost, but neither country going at least, might give Canada a little more than an edge than if the US had gone.
Fair point. Always look on the bright side of life. I like it.
Exactly. Since both teams made it, I don't think it really, moves anything, pushes the envelope anywhere, unless you watch some of those Canada games and he's like, this team really needs some help up top. Maybe I can be that guy. That's really some of the only things I can think of. But again, both teams weren't playing their strongest squad, both the US and Canada. So I'm not sure how much weight you can really put into that decision.
True that.
Yeah, let's chat before we wrap up. Let's chat quickly about TFC and their start to preseason. TFC, they got underway March 27th, so that was just 3 days ago. I think it was Saturday, where they played their first preseason match. They took on Fort Lauderdale FC, or CF, which of course is Inter Miami's USL team. And some good news, TFC won 3-0. Goals scored by Alejandro Pozuelo, Patrick Mullins, and of course Michael Bradley, which is something that we have talked about on this show a couple of times, and that's that Michael Bradley will be playing a little bit higher up on the field this season. So, first test out of the way, we see a Michael Bradley goal, which is something we didn't see at all last season, and
but we did see it in 2019. Golden Boot leader Michael Bradley.
We
Game
did
one.
see it in the past.
Yep.
So, Michael Bradley did have a little bit of a down year last year, especially coming off injury. So, this refreshed preseason, a new role. Could we see a new Michael Bradley in 2021?
Sure. Bring it on.
Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably the most interesting thing going to this preseason. And, the Club Leon Champions League game is that midfield and what Toronto FC is going to do with it. Because I think that's going to be form. Early returns, obviously, we don't enable look like they're going to be a positive. Of course, Toronto, Columbus, April 1st. So, well, we get to see that game as well. That'll be interesting.
So Mitch's Wi-Fi cut out a little bit on him, let him down.
Yeah.
But what he was saying was TFC. Their next, I guess, preseason game is April the 1st, which I believe would be on Thursday. So they're taking on the Columbus Crew in that game, and that'll be their first real preseason kind of test before Club Leon. I think it's actually their last preseason game before they head to Club Leon. I could be mistaken on that, but whether or not that game's televised, that still needs to be determined. It's not Toronto FC's fault. It's not Eric G's fault, by the way. This is MLS protocol and COVID protocol with everything. How difficult.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a chance that game might be streamed or might be live tweeted at least. Hopefully it is, but if not, guys, don't blame TFC or their content team for
blame One Soccer.
It's out of their hands. Yeah, go after One Soccer for all that. That's funny.
Yeah, got to bring it back.
Yeah.
It's called Runner. Yeah, indeed.
If my Wi-Fi is good enough here, I wonder if this game even does get broadcast. From the sense I've mentioned it before, does Toronto FC want tape out there before the Club Leon game? And I don't think they do. So I wonder if we don't see this game at all, just from that sense.
It's a very good point, Mitch. We're not going to see one. Everybody get ready for 0 streams. We want to surprise Club Leon. I think it's worth trying to see through foggy fog on an iPhone lens to have total that advantage. So yeah. I'll find something else to do that day.
For those who did stick it out here till the end, I have a great Ralph Priesta quote. I got a chance to speak to him last week, and this quote is: I asked him about Chris Armas versus Greg Vanney. What sort of the biggest difference we'll see out of these two coaches? And I love it. So this is what Ralph Priesta said. His answer was speed, energy. I think the way we played with Greg was more methodical, more patient, kind of wait, maybe move the ball a little bit more to kind of move the opponent, versus now we're up in the ante. We're going quicker. And then if we do make a mistake, we're there to win the ball back, and then we go again. I think that's the biggest difference.
Sweet.
So
sweet.
That lines up with what Chris Armas has been saying. That lines up with what everybody else has been saying. And that's that TFC is going to be playing on the front foot this season. We saw what Mexico did to Canada's U23 team, where every time they lost the ball, whether that was a striker, whether that was, their number 10, everybody was pressing the second they lost the ball. They didn't give Canada's U23 team any space because Canada's U23 team didn't deserve it. They showed that they couldn't play out of a press. They showed that they couldn't play under pressure. And with most MLS sides, I think that's a similar case. I don't think they're at the quality yet where, I think prove it to us and then we'll give you a little bit more respect. Because but this league, we've seen it. The press is so effective. It's so effective. And when you're there to capitalize on mistakes, I think that's where you can make your real money, and especially with the type of players that TFC have and North American teams in general have. They're all, fast paced, kind of get in your face, physical, and you combine that with the talent that TFC has, it could be a dangerous recipe for success.
Do a lot of damage. I like it. Sounds great. Let's go.
Yeah, I think that would be a good place to wrap up the show. Mitch, if you want to try and chime in here and sign us off, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll see how my Wi-Fi holds up, but awesome, of course, to have
not holding up.
That,
that
he brings.
I think I'll sign us off, Mitch.
I'm tagging Mike.
All right, thanks.
All right. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in once again. We do have hopefully some exciting news on the horizon. And we're looking forward to the rest of the season. Hey, next week we'll have a big Club Leon preview show because we're going right the day before. Hopefully we can bring on a good guest for that. But in the meantime, thank you to Sophia. Thank you to Kevin. Thank you to Edwin, who does some great writing for us. And yeah, I guess until next time, we'll see you guys next week.
Cheers.